Hi, everyone. It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil, Amok to you. Playing my Trump instrument today. You got to practice, just in case, because that's how they're going to allow people to stay in the country. If you can do a Trump imitation, all right, I got to work on mine. Melania. That's how I get into the key of Trump. Hey, so Fani Willis, I've got to tell you that I had to tear away from the hearings because I felt sorry for Fani Willis. I thought that Fani Willis was being badgered and beaten up, even though here's a black woman who is a district attorney, right? She knows the rules of the court. She stood up, right? I mean, she's fighting for herself. But decorum, right? Everyone else has to practice decorum, but not Donald Trump, right? So they need decorum. And this whole thing is being orchestrated by Trump because he wants Fani Willis, who has been one of the most aggressive DAs against Trump, he wants her out. So I'm just really disappointed that Fani Willis, after this hearing today, is going to be seen as unreasonable, rambunctious. She's going to be all the negatives. I mean, that's just the thing about, people's perception, right? I see it, and I'm actually very sympathetic toward Fani Willis. I think she's getting beaten up on. I think she's trying to explain herself. I think she's trying to do everything right to make sure that the lies that are perpetrated in some of these documents that have been filed, she's trying to correct the record. But she's in a position where she can't win. So I feel for her. And, she's describing her life, how she had a good life. She didn't want to run for DA. She was a municipal judge. She had some cases on the side. She can have her private practice. She was living in her own house. And this is before, and she became DA and she couldn't live in her own house. And I think it's an important part that when you are called on to testify, when charges are brought or when they're trying to make a case against you and you're under oath, the vulnerabilities of Fani Willis in this case are great. I mean, she's been under attack from all the other people she's prosecuting. I don't know really if she can continue being the DA of Fulton County. I mean, she's revealed so much about, she revealed that because of her father insisted that you have cash, you have lock boxes and safes, cash. I just kept thinking, boy, you let everyone know in a public testimony, in a court proceeding that is seen on cable, that you've got cash, and what does it say to the people, the perps, that you're bringing to court as a prosecutor? I'm just saying it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough going, it's going to be tough to beat public opinion because there's going to be enough people out there saying, well, surely, but Fani Willis isn't qualified. There's going to be people like that. There's going to be people like me and others who say, God, she's being badgered. God, they're going after her for an irrelevancy because whatever she did with this guy, Norman Wade, is private, had nothing to do with the case. That's my opinion. But seeing how they're setting up the case and seeing how the prosecution or how the attorneys are going after Fani Willis, I don't blame Fani Willis for wanting to stand up and say, hey, this is how I feel. This is the truth. But, God, I wish she just meditated for 5 minutes because it's not helping her. And I'm telling you this as a person who would have reacted like Fani Willis to say, oh my God, what are you doing? And the judge had to say that she was going to he was going to strike her testimony if she didn't calm down. They had to take a 5-minute break. But it was very compelling. If you haven't been watching the Fani Willis testimony, that's on all the cable channels, because it is important. It is important because Donald Trump wants to remove Fani Willis from the case and wants to cast this doubt on her that she is not the right woman for, to prosecute Trump. But just imagine what Trump has done, right? Outside of this case, right? He has been found guilty, or not guilty, liable for sexual assault. He is found to have defamed E. Jean Carroll, and he still has credibility. Fani Willis, after today's testimony, like I said, I think it's going to be hard for her to say, I'm going to stay on top of this case. There will be a push for her to be removed based on the way she testified today, as they tried to keep her on there to badger her and to get her to lose some credibility. And I think they succeeded, even though you look at what she did and you compare that to what Trump has done in other courtrooms. And all I saw was a professional African-American woman trying to defend herself. Made perfect sense to me. But maybe to some others, they'll say, Fani Willis out. Hey, I'm rooting for Fani Willis. I don't know how the decision is going to be made. They're trying to make the case that, she didn't have the money and she was dependent on this guy, and all these things that are irrelevant to the Trump prosecution, really, but are used to discredit Willis. Sad. I mean, this is justice in America, right? I had to turn away. Because, forgive me, I was very, very sympathetic towards Fani Willis. I thought that whole thing was very, very sympathetic toward her. Hey, look, so that's item number one. By the way, welcome to Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. We talk about the news here. Old-fashioned talk radio. Get on the news, get on the horn, talk about stuff. I'm telling you something. I'm still a little saddened and confused about the Kansas City shooting. The 49th shooting so far in America, mass shooting. Get this about Fani Willis. Or not Fani Willis, but the Kansas City shooting. They identified the DJ. They said she was a DJ. And I was curious about KKFI, right? It's a public station. It's a Pacifica station. And Lisa Lopez Galvin was a DJ there, but it's like a Pacifica station. It wasn't like she's big time Ryan Seacrest playing the hits. She's a regular community person. And it just saddens me that she's there at a community celebration and she's one of the victims. 22 people shot. She's the one who loses her life. It's just sad. Just sad. So I was listening to KKFI today a little bit, and on the jazz show at noon my time, they had a moment of silence. What can you do, right? I worked at a Pacifica station. I worked at KPFT in Texas, in Houston. Done some shows at KPFA in Berkeley. I know what community stations are about, and they're just regular people. No one's making money. They do broadcasting. They do radio for the love of communicating information, news, valuable community information on the public airways, not commercial free. And Lisa Lopez Galvin loses her life at a at a public celebration. I'm telling you, we're getting to a point where we may not be able to have public celebrations. We may only be able to have Zoom celebrations. How's that grab you? Oh, no, not Zoom celebrations. It may be the only safe way. The only safe way. I hate that. And maybe the pandemic was the start. You know, the pandemic was a way to say, hey, look, this is where our world is going. You know, to protect ourselves from infections and viruses and bad actors. The people will come and destroy our right to celebrate in public. And unless we grow up as a society, I don't know how we can avoid it. Welcome to the Super Bowl celebration here in your town. It's by Zoom this year because we can't afford to have a public celebration. That would just be tragic. But I think we're coming to that. Okay, this is going to be a quick show today because I've got something coming up that I must do, but I want to mention two more things. Steve Wilks was fired. He was the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. I'm a 49er fan. I was upset that they lost, but look, once again, meditation has helped me has helped me let go of it, right? I'm not Amok about it any longer. I would have 5 years ago, but I'm adult, I'm mature. But here's the thing that gets me about Steve Wilks. They fired him. And Mike Shanahan says, or Kyle Shanahan, excuse me, Mike is his dad. Kyle Shanahan said, well, it just wasn't a good fit. And I'm thinking, wasn't a good. Now, in the itinerant world of football coaches, just like the itinerant world of broadcasting, people just pick up and go. I don't want to play here. I'll find another sandbox. That's the way it is in jobs like football coach. But what if it weren't? I mean, he's also an African American. What if you say, what if it was a regular job? You can't just go up to someone and say, hey, look, it just doesn't fit. You're out. Now, because I'm in a job like the kind of jobs I've had, someone says that and I say, okay, I'll go. Because I don't want to be there either if it's a bad fit. But what if you're not in that kind of job? You can't just say to someone, especially a person of color, you can't say, hey, bad fit, get out of here. Or you're gone. Here's your 2 weeks notice. Maybe they should try to make it fit. I don't know if Steve Wilks is going to fight it, but it made me think about the kind of discrimination you face in the workplace. You can't, if someone went up to you today and said, we're firing you because you're a bad fit, I would say, well, let's go talk to HR and see how we can make it fit. Let's talk to HR and see how you could be a little less of this and I could be a little less of that, and we could fit a square peg in a round hole. But I didn't hear anything about Steve Wilks saying, well, I'm going to fight it. I only heard the Shanahan part where it said, hey, bad fit. And then everyone just kind of accepting it. But here's a black football coach in a league that has been notorious about not hiring black football coaches. He's not a head coach in this case. He's a defensive coach. But it just struck me as odd. Bad fit. Can you, after you've hired them, paid them, gone to the Super Bowl, can you just say, I'm firing you because you're a bad fit? I mean, we just got to the Super Bowl. Am I that bad a fit? Or is this one of those things that are above and beyond fairness? Diversity be damned. Don't care if you're a black coach. You don't win, get out. Well, white coaches get fired for not winning. Black coaches too. I mean, it's something to think about. I don't like it. Although frankly, I didn't like Steve Wilks' approach to defense this year. In fact, there was that whole thing about he's always upstairs. He's a stoic and up in the booth. He had to come down to the field, and then finally he did. He said something to the 49ers front line, defensive line, the last two games because they finally showed up. But, this is one of those things about sports. No one will question sports in terms of, is that a legal thing you can do? Just fire him for not winning? Diversity hire? Or does it matter? You got to win. You just have to win. I don't know what Steve Wilks has said, if he's made a response. The only reporting I've seen is Kyle Shanahan saying, bad fit. But I think if Steve Wilks wants the job, he should fight for it. But if he wants a job anywhere in the NFL, he'll play by the rules and go away. That's the unfortunate part. Because I'm telling you, we've had this discussion about NFL coaches. They don't hire black ones. There's not a whole lot of diversity among the coaching ranks. And Steve Wilks did help the Niners get to the Super Bowl. Maybe he didn't help them win it, but he helped them get there. All right, one other thing I want to mention, and that is this Washington Post story is a good story. It's on horse racing. And I just lost the story. And it's a sports story about horse racing at the bush track level. And here's the headline. This is a story by Guy Garcia Roberts. And it involves PETA. The headline is, the feds raid on a bush track fizzled, so horses kept racing and dying. And it's interesting because this is about the bush tracks in Georgia, which have proliferated when, this Guy Garcia Roberts did a first story a few months back. They were ready to shut down the Georgia track. And this story reveals that the feds canceled the raid. And when they canceled the raid, it was like a green light to all the bad guys who run the bush tracks to, let's proliferate this thing. And it's like doubled, tripled all over the country because of this failed action by the feds. Here's the lead. A couple of years ago, the federal government planned an intimidating show of force at an unlicensed horse track in rural Georgia. Hundreds of officers from the DEA, FBI, Homeland Security, and the Department of Agriculture. Hundreds. This is like a war on these bush tracks, essentially, that they're putting on. They would corral thousands of horsemen. That was the plan. They were going to storm the track, corral thousands of horsemen and spectators, seize cash, drugs, and lead dozens of horses onto government trailers. And just like that, the government would have delivered a shot across the bow of so-called bush tracks, a booming, lawless industry with documented ties to international organized crime. But the cavalry never arrived. The big Race day came and went with no raid. The USDA agents leading the investigation said they had been outranked by more powerful federal parties, or partners rather, who settled their plans, interviews, who scuttled their plans, interviews, records show. Basically, FBI shut us down and took over the case, senior USDA investigator Kenneth Cash said. They're a 3-letter agency and we're a 4-letter agency. We get treated like 4-letter words. The track continued to operate undisturbed. Eventually, in August 2022, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals raised concerns about the track to journalists. The Washington Post observed horses being injected with syringes, including one found to contain methamphetamine, and jockeys utilizing shock devices. Finally, last June, local authorities arrested 7 people connected with the track. But the charges were relatively minor. 6 jockeys, all of whom have also raced on regulated tracks, were charged with cruelty to animals after PETA provided evidence of them repeatedly whipping and using a shock device on horses. An alleged bookie was charged with illegal commercial gambling, a felony. All 7 defendants have pleaded not guilty. Federal agents abandoned plans to raid the track even as a separate case showed, according to prosecutors, that a once central figure to Rancho El Centenario was allegedly involved in the sale of large amounts of methamphetamine and other drugs. Meanwhile, the disbarred attorney who owns the horse track, Arthur Brutz English IV, has not been charged and continues to run a full race schedule. He recently taunted local authorities by distributing souvenir pens shaped to look like syringes. It's a good story. And it's in the Washington Post today online. Headline, the Feds raid on bush track fizzled, so horses kept racing and dying. These are bush tracks. They get away with drugging horses. There's illegal betting. There's drugs being used, horses dying. It attracts all sorts of people who are mostly undocumented, and it's thriving. And even though the light is shining, the Washington Post, PETA got in on this and said, hey, look, PETA was concerned about the animals. But I think more people, maybe the people who shut down the raid, were concerned about what it looked like in terms of dealing with the people who frequent these kind of races, which are mostly immigrants, documented and undocumented. But money is being exchanged, and there are ties to what looks to be like organized crime, local organized crime. Anyway, check it out, Washington Post. Another one of the stories that get overlooked because of all the stories that are breaking today. We had in the New York Trump case, you got Trump or the judge saying, hey, we're going to have a trial. I don't care what you say. We're going to have a trial. And the trial has been set for, I believe, March 25th, right? So that's a thing. Let me get that confirmation here. Yeah. You got Trump's trial on charges related to hush money payments. This is involving the Stormy Daniels, beginning on March 25th. Okay. And then, you got this other story, which is wild, but not really so wild. I mean, it's 2024. We got people fighting, drone wars. And at some point, you had to figure that people would resort to a kind of an anti-satellite weapon up in space. Now, it seemed out of this world or otherworldly in 1980, and people made fun of Ronald Reagan. They called it, oh, he's fighting his Star Wars thing. Here we are, 40 years later. Technology has pushed us to this new frontier. And I think what we're seeing is Republicans who are not necessarily pro-Trump, but they're not pro-Russia. And they see what Trump is doing with Russia, and they want to shock people into saying, hey, look, our real enemy is Russia, and look at what they're doing with this weapon system. The White House, the feds, aren't revealing any more plans about or information about other than that broad, notion that Russia has some kind of system where they're using anti-missile kind of weapons in space. And we have to understand that Russia is the bad guy. Russia is the bad. It's not, no matter what Trump says, he's not president. No matter what the Trump propaganda or the Tucker Carlson propaganda, Russia is our enemy. So I guess you say kudos to Mike Turner, the congressman who kind of started spreading the word yesterday that, hey, Russia is working on this anti-satellite weapon out in space. No real details, but usually it's things like this that help get us together, right? I mean, if you think maybe America is beyond coming together and will stay divided, maybe there's no hope. But if you think that there is a way, we're on the same team, we're fighting the same enemy. The enemy is, in this case, Putin, their anti-satellite weaponry. We got to remember that. And we also have to remember that Russia invaded Ukraine, and the money for Ukraine is important. And supporting our allies is important. And who has been talking trash about our allies and saying Putin can do anything he wants? But this guy Trump, who wants to be president again. And I think the news about the Russia thing was leaked so that people just get a handle on this, what this means when you hear Trump campaigning and saying, oh, Putin, let Putin do whatever he wants. Allies, forget the allies. Ukraine money, forget Ukraine. Ukraine money is important. NATO is important. Russia is not an ally or friend. Russia is the enemy. Just to put things in a blunt, straight way. So, going back to Fani Willis, Trump attorneys are just trying to get Willis removed as the lead prosecutor. It could slow down the case. And if it does and make it fall apart, it would be a victory for Trump. All he wants to do is get it to, delay the trial until after the election, and then all of it, he can make it all disappear if he's president. Even though Fani Willis may have a case. But today, after her testimony, I know, it did not go well. I felt for her because, she's getting the same treatment that she would have given a defendant. And it's to rattle the defendant and discredit them. That's what they're doing. And it's sad because Fani Willis, she looked like she had a strong case. I imagine they must have someone who's like a backup who will fill in. But, as far as Trump goes, I know that he's just wanting to delay. And today's Willis testimony, Trump's winning. Trump's winning. Even though very sympathetic toward Willis, and I want her to succeed. In fact, I think it's ridiculous that after this hearing, she's going to be seen as having no credibility, I think. I mean, that to me, I think that's how people are going to view it. Because we live in this skewed world where people see all of Trump's actions and like 50% or more who want him to be president again. Nothing makes sense. All right, that's it for our show today. I got something to do at 3, and I'm back again tomorrow. We'll be back with Dan Gonzalez talking about the news. I hope. Yeah, it's always good to talk to Dan about the news. Get his take. Yeah, he's a lawyer, schooled in law, a JD. He's not a practicing lawyer, but his insights are often helpful. So we'll talk to him tomorrow. In the meantime, man, Fani Willis, I would have given her some meditative tricks just to relax and let it pass. She tried. Too much of a prosecutor on the stand. It was not. She was talking too long. It was not good. And I hope she's all right. I mean, I thought she was sympathetic. I would vote to keep her as the prosecutor. But they're coming after her. Badgering is the term, I think. Okay. A little meditation. It's the loving kindness meditation. METTA. Just let things flow. Let things go. Don't dwell. Don't strive. Do nothing. Works for me. Offer love to others first and then to yourself. Oh, by the way, did you have a nice Valentine's Day? It dawned on me that this is the first day of Lent, so it was appropriate, right? We had Fat Tuesday and then Ash Wednesday. One last blowdown Tuesday, and then the start of Lent. You get the ashes. It almost kind of put a damper out, I think, on Valentine's Day. From dusk to dusk, right? I guess if you're Catholic. But I think I did notice a lot of people were anti-Valentine's Day. They were anti-VD, don't force love on us. Don't. So, in my meditative approach, I show love to others. And then hopefully it comes back. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Mahal